Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Ethan, how are you?
Everything is great today. Welcome back to Films and Stuff.
So, what have we got on tap today?
Today is our stream or skip episode. We both had assignments. I had from HBO Max, DMZ. Those are initials that stand for Demilitarized Zone. And you had something from Hulu, right?
I did. I had an older series from Hulu. I had Future Man. Do you want to start with DMZ?
Let me kick it off. DMZ, starring Rosario Dawson.
Oh,
That's a
I'm
name
already in.
Said.
I am 100%
I haven't said that in a long time, right?
Not since The Mandalorian, yeah.
Yeah, not since The Mandalorian. So let me give you the rundown. It is a mini-series, which means that it's only 4 episodes. As I mentioned, it is on HBO Max. It came out earlier in 2022, March of 2022, and it's based on a comic book. And since you're the comic book expert, have you ever heard of this before?
I have not. DMZ? No.
DMZ, not the rapper, the show.
Isn't the rapper DMX?
Oh, maybe that's right. I wish I could take that back, but I can't. It's been said, memorialized forever. So in any case, it's only 4 episodes, and it is based in the near future after there has been a civil war, and the Manhattan, New York area is essentially a continued war zone. And outside of this Manhattan area, it's kind of the normal United States. So my first, I guess the first thing that came to me when I was kind of getting into this was, this is a lot like The Handmaid's Tale, which was, right, kind of the DC area. So I found a lot of, I guess, similarities just in terms of the theme between this. And I know that you said you're a huge Rosario Dawson fan. Once I started to get into this, to be honest, I was really intrigued by the idea. And then it fell away a little bit because the premise of these 4 episodes is that in the evacuation of the Manhattan area, what they call the demilitarized zone, she was separated from her, young son, and she goes back into the DMZ in order to try to find him. And I have to say, as far as a 4-episode series is concerned, I kind of lost the anticipation for what was going to happen. Now the plot was set, right? She lost her son. She's going to go in. There's going to be all these, obstacles and people, and she's going to have to survive a little bit. She's going to find her son. They're going to get out. Everyone's going to live happily ever after. I really lost a lot of ambition to carry on once I found out that was the premise. Only because I think that we've just seen that in so many different movies and shows, and usually that's not the central. It's not like the central plot, right? It's a few episode plot, or it's ancillary to the main show, but this was the entire plot. So that, coupled with the fact that we've kind of already seen this with The Handmaid's Tale, and you and I spoke about The Handmaid's Tale before, and we said, I'll summarize 2 things. Thing number 1, exceptional show, acting, casting, production, so forth. Very, very emotionally negative to watch.
Yeah.
Where you get out of that show and you don't really feel like socializing with people. You don't feel optimistic. You don't feel like any renewed energy. It's a downer, right? And entertainment doesn't necessarily have to be all, rainbows and unicorns. But to be honest, there's something about, putting yourself in a worse mood watching something.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit down on DMZ after I watched the first episode for those two things. I felt like I felt like I was really going to be brought down by the premise, and I wasn't really emotionally invested in Rosario Dawson, trying to find her son. I pushed through the next two episodes, so I watched 3 out of 4, and then I was reading some stuff online, so I knew how 4 ended, so I didn't finish it off. But 2 and 3 deals with a lot of political drama, and that's maybe, it can't be avoided, but I felt like there were a lot of quasi-political statements being made about maybe the drug war in like South America, Central America, Mexico, in terms of, the way that the cartels are treated by the US government, how sometimes the cartels are pitted against each other. I found a lot of, kind of political statements in terms of, the support of puppet regimes in other countries and how government support was, given or taken away based on things. There's a lot of political intrigue in this show because there's essentially 2 different warring factions, kind of the Chinatown gang and the Harlem Kings gang, which are both led by pretty charismatic actors. So you see a lot of this kind of like turf war stuff. And then there's obviously this other aspect between, kind of the US military, which is not in the DMZ, but of course, they kind of want to invade and, take back control of this area. So I have to say episodes 2 and 3 also kind of brought me down just because I felt like there were a lot of political statements in here. And I felt like we were really getting away from a unique like action or drama series. And we were getting more into more of a Hollywood kind of, political statement. The action is good. There's a good amount of drama. The acting is great. There's a lot of very smart dialogue. I guess there was kind of less action than there is action, but there's kind of less action than I was expecting. It wasn't so much like, remember the series 24? It wasn't so much like 24 with all this action. There was actually quite a bit of dialogue and I'd say like a lot of negotiations and things like that between the 2 different gangs and trying to get what she wants or where she wants to go or trying to find her son. And then when she gets her son, she's got to bring him back. And it's good. Let me just summarize by saying it's good. It's well done, but I still give it a skip just because it didn't really do anything for me. It wasn't a show that made me think. It didn't really open my eyes in terms of new ideas, new concepts. It didn't have, crazy types of action or settings or anything. It was just filmed in kind of a burnt out graffiti-ish, Manhattan street corners or burned out buildings. And I guess at the end, I just didn't feel like I was really better off in any way for watching it. I didn't really learn anything. I didn't get any new ideas. I didn't get any creativity. I wasn't like, wow, those stunts or those effects or that something. It's a very good show on HBO Max, but still I came away giving it a skip. And as I said, I didn't even watch the 4th and ultimate episode. When I was reading online, I learned how it's going to end.
And that was enough for you?
And that was enough for me.
Yeah.
I guess I was a little bit surprised it's only 4 episodes. Because it seems like a lot of effort, to only put together 4 episodes. Certainly there's not really enough content for for a season of 8. I mean, even now, a season of 8, which is kind of where we're headed with a lot of these, series, it's not a very long season to like get into something. It used to be like 10 or 12. Now we're getting into like 7 or 8. So I don't really see how they could have stretched it out to 7 or 8. I guess they could do a sequel. I mean, there's enough kind of political drama that I'm sure if there was enough clamor for it, they could come up with a storyline for sure. There's enough characters and subtle issues that they could, create something around it, just like they've done with Handmaid's Tale, right?
Right.
But again, I didn't really see any like loose ends that I was dying to see resolved. I didn't see any backstories that I was desperate to know more about. It was what you would expect on HBO Max, but I have to say, having watched 3, I was usually everything on HBO Max is just like almost wow, and I felt like this one was pretty like meh. Maybe it got the green light because it was only 4 episodes, so it's half the cost, or they just wanted to do a teaser, or they wanted to prevent someone else from getting the rights for the comic book. I'm not sure, but
that does sound like the old school Warner Brothers business tactic.
Yeah. So I have to say it's a skip for me, because if you never, I don't think this was popular enough. And I looked at the numbers on IMDb. I don't think this was popular enough that if you go to a cocktail party or any event and there's a lull in conversation, you can bring this up and anyone's going to know what you're talking about. Unlike kind of Game of Thrones, some of those shows, Yellowstone, for example, that have enough, I guess, impact across culture. If there's like a deafening silence, you could probably bring up Game of Thrones and somehow manage your way through that conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're stuck at a table at a dinner party or a wedding or fundraiser, wherever, and there's 6 other people at the table and you have nothing to talk about, and it's just like painful, you can just say, "Hey, anyone ever see Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon?" And at least somehow you can stumble through a conversation and find like some common ground, right?
Yeah.
If you would be at that same table and say, "Hey, is anyone watching DMZ on HBO Max?" I feel like that would make the conversation worse. It'd be like, that's what you've got to talk about. Like, you're not talking about Yellowstone. You're not talking about, any Kardashian reality show. You're not talking about sports. Even Handmaid's Tale probably has like a good amount of like cultural awareness. DMZ, I just don't think has the popularity to fill that void. So for me, it's a skip, with all my respect and all my hats off to Rosario Dawson and her team. There's nothing to see here.
Okay. All right. So that's DMZ on HBO Max, a skip. I, on the other hand,
start it off, Pete. We need a good start to 2023. What do you got?
I have something interesting. I saw a series called Future Man on Hulu.
Future Man.
Spoiler alert, I gave it a mooch. However, I will be upfront in saying that this could be a show that I imagine you would enjoy, because it has all the elements that we typically like. A, it's sci-fi. B, it's got elements of time travel in it. And C, it's got a pretty stellar cast, actually. So let's start from the top. Have you ever watched, do you remember the classic film, The Last Starfighter?
The Last Starfighter?
Yeah.
It sounds so familiar, but I cannot say that I know.
Yeah, it's an early 80s movie, and I'm sure you will have heard about it if you haven't seen it, and you probably have seen it, you just don't remember. But it's about this kid who plays a video game, and then he's the only one who's able to beat that video game, or he's the most successful at that video game. Wow. And then we learned that the video game was actually a training a training simulator, and that the war
Oh
in the video game is
man,
actually true. And so
Ender's Game.
huh?
Yes, it's like Ender's Game.
Similar to Ender's Game, not quite, but yes, conceptually exactly the same, right? Because he kept using that simulation as a training exercise,
Yes,
but then
yes,
we learned
yes.
that that's the real thing. So yes, I have
Right.
those in my notes as well. It's very similar to that conceptually. You have what is in effect a down on his luck nerd slash geek slash loser who's a janitor who works at this science lab that is researching like all these kinds of like STDs and venereal diseases.
Yeah.
He's very good at video games.
Okay.
He beats a video game that no one else can beat. It's supposedly the only unbeatable game in existence.
Okay.
And lo and behold, within an hour of beating that game, two time travelers from the future come back to recruit him because that video game was used as a training exercise to see who could actually beat this war that's happening in the future. That's 100 odd years.
Oh man, this sounds like the Peripheral as well.
Kind of, but not quite. This is exactly the similar conceptually, right? And so and he finds out that the person who kicks off this war is actually the boss that is his boss at this science lab slash venereal disease clinic, research clinic, whatever it is.
Okay.
And so
a venereal disease clinic. I love
yeah,
it.
it's something weird like that. So ultimately, this is a sci-fi show, but it's obviously a comedy, right? They play it up for big laughs,
Yeah.
and it's got
Yeah.
some incredibly lowbrow humor. So STD jokes, urethra jokes, poo and pee jokes,
Yikes.
that kind of thing.
Yikes.
So that's what I'm saying by saying it could be a hit, it could be a miss for a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, a few jokes here and there every once in a while, I'll still laugh, but when it's constant, you're just like, ugh, okay, get it over with. You know, it's a little bit too
Yeah.
childish even for me, and I am a huge child. But anyway, so the story is that, you know, they come back to recruit this guy. They want to go back in time. They want to go back in the future and either fight the war or to end the war before it starts. So this is kind of like Terminator. And so they decide to go back in time to prevent the wars from even starting. And then it becomes a little bit cliched in terms of the premise and plot line, at least for season 1. I've only seen the first two episodes. And, you know, he meets a younger version of his grandparents, of himself. And, you know, there's very much a Back to the Future vibe. It's very cliched. It clearly is a show that picked from a lot of different pop cultural time travel movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure that in season 2, it'll be about the unintended consequences from season 1. So like by the end of season 1, I'm sure they'll have completed their quest and stopped the war, only for them to find out that the war is still raging in another way because of something else. You know, this is your super stereotypical Back to the Future time travel, Terminator 2 style time travel movies. Yeah. Nothing we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
The cast is pretty excellent. It stars Josh Hutcherson, who you may remember as PETA from The Hunger Games. And
PETA, yeah.
Eliza Coupe, who most people they'll remember her. She's been in a few sitcoms. I was introduced to her in Scrubs as Denise. I fell in love with her there. I had a massive crush on her. I thought she was great. But interestingly enough, actually, it's the supporting cast that kind of steal the show. So you've got Aquafina is in there, Ron Funches is in there, yeah. Paul Scheer, Haley Joel Osment, Keith David.
Oh, Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You've got some really A-list side characters.
Ed Begley Jr.
It's crazy. It's actually quite surprising. The show has pretty high production value. It's like the effects are obviously the 3D effects for the video game sequences are pants, But, the time traveling effects, the explosions, the fighting, all of that's pretty decent.
Okay.
But having said all of that, like I said earlier, it's a mooch. It's not great. There are some good and funny elements to it. The time travel elements, all that kind of stuff is interesting to me. But they haven't really done anything new with it. Certainly nothing that we haven't seen before in a multitude of other programs and TV shows and movies. The lowbrow
Yeah.
humor for me kind of takes it away from it. And you get the shtick of people from the future who don't really understand past customs, that sort of thing, like the fish out of water story kind of thing.
Yeah.
So again, it's not bad, but it's not fantastic. I wouldn't consider this a skip. Like if I saw this on in the background, I wouldn't actively run away from it and choose something else. So it's something that I might keep on in the background if I'm doing something else, or if I need something on, but I wouldn't actively seek this out. My understanding is that there are
Pete,
only
does it bother you, Pete, when you find a show and you really like some elements of it, and you're like, if it could just do this, or if it could just cut out that, it would be like, wow.
yeah,
Does that bother you or drive you crazy?
maybe it bothers me less for this show because it seems almost exclusively unoriginal.
Okay.
Like every plot element or every premise element is taken from another movie that preceded it or a TV series that
Yeah.
preceded it. So for me, that becomes less interesting. So, if everything, it's not a show that's greater than the sum of its parts, let's put it that way. And
Yeah.
so, whereas, for example, there were a couple of things in the peripheral where I was just like, man, they didn't need this element. Why is that here?
Yeah.
That love story that they were trying to cram in with Wilf and
Yes. Yes.
that if they removed
Totally
that, I think that would have
unnecessary.
been fine. I think that would have been better. Like it served no function, at least in season one, and it just came out of nowhere, for example. Whereas here, they're just taking everything from all these other shows. So you're just like, okay, I get what they're doing, and that's fine. It's like, okay, I need to make the best movie or the best TV book ever. All right, so I'm going to take elements of Harry Potter. I'm going to take elements of Dune. I'm going to take elements of, the top 10 books of the last 10 years, and I'm going to cram them
Yeah.
together. But it's very transparent in what they're trying to do here. And I'm not
Yeah.
accusing anyone for this, by the way. I'm not saying that this was a cash grab or this is them being, morally bankrupt and that they're all obviously stealing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it's just so obvious where the inspiration for a lot of these ideas come from that you're just like,
Yeah.
it's fine.
When I look at the cover art for this, and I read the one sentence narratives description,
Yeah, the log line.
I have to say I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a parody or not, right? The cover is almost
If it were a parody, I think this would be
yeah,
great, but I don't think that's what they set out for it to be.
yeah,
If it were a parody, it would be a little bit more humorous. It would poke a little bit more fun at itself. It would be a little bit more meta about the characters in the situations they were
yeah.
in. This isn't that. This is not a parody, or at least I don't think this is what they anticipated or that they wanted it to be a parody.
Because this is what it says on IMDb Pro about is the synopsis. It's one sentence. This is what it says. Josh Futureman, a janitor by day and a gamer by night, is recruited by mysterious visitors to travel through time to prevent the extinction of humanity. That line is so, I mean, that screams parody in a way, doesn't it?
Kind of. It
Janitor
also
by day,
screams
gamer by night.
generic.
Yeah, it screams generic as well.
So
I mean, you'd rather not have, I mean, I understand the dichotomy between a janitor. You want them to, you're saying they're every man, right? They're just, but you don't have to
just
be a
your
janitor.
regular Joe Blow.
I mean, come on. I mean, there's a lot of people, I mean, there's very few people that are like really janitors, who are not struggling to survive, right? I mean, so if I agree. They could have just been, like an anonymous, like graphic design person. They
A
could have worked in,
plumber, an
yeah,
electrician.
yeah, I
Your
mean,
average blue collar
right.
Joe is what I
Yeah.
think they were trying to go
Yeah.
for.
To say janitor almost like demeans them, right? Okay. Well, I mean, it's a mooch.
It's definitely a
That's
mooch.
yeah.
So it's, again, not bad. I see what they're trying to do, or at least what I perceive them to try to be doing. It didn't
Yeah.
land for me, and that's fine. I think it's okay. I think that for some, it will land. Maybe for a younger audience who didn't necessarily grow up with the movies we grew up with, who didn't see The Last
Mm,
Starfighter, who aren't maybe aware of Ender's Game, who don't know Terminator 2, who don't know Back to the
yeah.
Future, or they didn't see them in the cinemas like we did when we were kids.
Yeah.
Those movies will hold a special place in our hearts because we saw them live, effectively, right? We saw them when they were cultural phenomenon. We didn't see them 20 years later on TV. We saw them, if not the same year they were released, within a year of their release.
If you're Josh Hutcherson,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he's obviously known for the four
Hunger Games films.
Hunger Games films. But if you were him and you were offered this series as the lead character, would you take it or would you say, I'm still gonna like consider my options?
So it's really tough, right? As an actor, I think you take whatever job you can get until you
Yeah.
become a superstar A-lister who has roles thrown at them left, right, and center. And
Yeah.
for all the success that the Hunger Games had, really the person who came out of that unscathed and who became a superstar was Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah.
And even after Jennifer Lawrence, I would say it was that younger Hemsworth brother, right? Luke or Liam or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't think Josh
Yeah.
Hutcherson came out of this as an A-lister. I don't think people were like, okay, we
No.
want you to be in the next 5 dramas. And
Yeah.
and even for the Liam or whatever, that younger Hemsworth brother, he has the brand recognition because of
Yeah. Because he's got
Chris
two other
Hemsworth.
brothers. Yeah.
So, and again, no, this is not me trying to slam the Hemsworths in any way, shape, or form. They're very good. Luke is excellent in Westworld. All of these guys, they're very good. But I'm just saying that I think that of the three younger actors, he probably came out third, or at least tied for a distant second. Jennifer Lawrence really is the one who went to the next level and beyond, and deservedly so. She's a very good actor. She's won
Yeah.
Oscars for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that when you are, let's put it this way: if I were Josh Hutcherson's Hollywood agent, I would be very blunt and upfront and say, "Hey, listen, you take whatever job you can get until you get to Jennifer's status."
Yeah.
And if you never get there, that's okay too. We'll keep getting you these kinds of roles, and that's fine. As long as you're making money,
Yeah.
that's all that counts.
Yeah. I mean, a title role, I mean, a lead role is a lead role, right? I mean, especially in
Yeah,
TV.
exactly. Exactly. And you never
This
know.
has been
These are
on for
also
3 seasons,
opportunities.
but yeah.
The TV landscape has also changed a lot in the last 5 years. I think 10 years ago,
Yeah.
15 years ago, an A-list actor would never really dream of being a regular on a TV series. And we've
Mhm.
seen that change, right? Now we are seeing premier actors. I think think all the way back to True Detective, where you had Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. Matthew
Yeah.
McConaughey, who was off of his Oscar-winning run, by the way, coming back to TV.
Yeah.
It's normally the old school trajectory of Hollywood was you start off in Broadway or TV, you move on to movies, and then you succeed and stay on in movies. That's it. You don't go back to TV. And I think that formula has changed a lot, especially with streaming nowadays.
I miss Matthew McConaughey in the rom-coms.
In the rom-com. I mean, that was where he cut his teeth. I mean, he was he was almost tailor-made for it. Him, Kate Hudson, all of these like staples, right?
Yeah. He had a really good run. And then, I mean, bravo to him for getting involved in things like Gold, The Dark Tower, all these other, like much more nuanced pieces. But I mean, he'll always have a place in my heart for his rom-coms.
Yeah.
All right. So that is Future Man.
That is Future Man on Hulu. 3 seasons. I believe the show concluded or was canceled, I don't know, in 2020. But it's not a bad show by any means. It's just not for me. It's a mooch. I imagine there is an audience out there. And for our younger listeners who are interested in sci-fi, I think this could be great for you. I just don't think it's for the older generation, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I just think that in a practical way, we're always going to compare it. We're always going to compare it to what we grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Every generation needs their benchmark, right? Maybe this is the benchmark.
Maybe. I don't think it will be, because I don't think a TV series has the same cultural impact, or I think it's rare for a TV series to have the same cultural impact a movie does. So I think there are other movies in this generation, or when I say this generation, I mean in this generation, within the last 10 years, that will probably be more apt.
All right. So you are, as you are wont to do, you have already rolled your virtual die. You have self-selected for next week's stream or skip assignment. What have you, my friend?
So for next week, I will be watching Monarch on Hulu also.
Is this the one about like Nashville record royalty?
What?
Or is this about like a Victorian monarch?
No, it's got to be about that, right? What else could it be? Monarch. It's got to be about the royal family, right? Like the English royal family?
Maybe.
I know there's a show called The Crown on Netflix, but I imagine that's what Monarch... I've never heard of it, but it has to be that. And in any case, that's for me for next week. And you, my friend, will be watching The Mole on Netflix.
My avatar is going berserk. I don't know if you saw him do a little dance, but he did a little dance.
Oh, well, maybe he's excited.
He is. I have The Mole, and the reason why I'm excited is that The Mole, which is on Netflix, is like our first game show-ish thing to review.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. So I think this one is a very unique show, but I think it's like an adventure game show mystery, something like this. I've heard of this. I don't know exactly how it is, but I'm excited to watch it and give a report next week.
Amazing. I'm so excited.
So am I. Okay, so that is this week's Stream or Skip, the first one of 2023.
We're back.
We're back, and we'll be back next week.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks a lot, Ethan. I look forward to hearing about The Mole on Netflix next week.
Monarch and the Mole next week. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Pete, thanks for participating.
Thanks, everyone.
Catch you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.